Hello and welcome to another edition of Horn Camp Connect, an offering of Kendall Betts Horn Camp and Cormont Music's gift to the horn community. Just a little background on Kendall Betts before we start. The Horn Camp, or KBHC, was founded in 1995 by its namesake Kendall Betts in the beautiful scenic north country of New Hampshire. In 2020, the decision was made to cancel the in-person version of KBHC and instead create the online KBHC experience. This experience reached more than 1,000 hornists worldwide. Building on this success, we created Horn Camp Connect to continue to strengthen these connections with monthly offerings to the greater horn community. As always, Horn Camp Connect will be led by our fearless leader, Bernhard Scully, former member of Canadian Brass, Associate Professor of Horn at the University of Illinois, and Artistic Director of Cormont Music, as well as Jesse McCormick, second horn of the Cleveland Orchestra, horn professor at Baldwin Wallace Conservatory, and Associate Artistic Director of Cormont Music. We are also very happy to have a guest artist joining us today, one Frank Lloyd, internationally renowned horn soloist and retired professor of horn at the Folkwang University of Arts in Essen, Germany. I'm your moderator, Chris Williams, former academist in the Kakayan Academy of the Berlin Philharmonic and former student of Bernard's. Now, before we jump in full to the session here, just a couple of Zoom housekeeping items. So that we may be able to hear the full presentation, we have muted all participants. Please stay muted for the duration unless one of our presenters asks you directly to unmute. If you click on the Participants tab located at the bottom of your Zoom window, you should see a participant list pop up somewhere with your name at the top. If the name associated with your Zoom account is different from your own name, we just ask you to click on the blue More button and select Rename so that we can know who we are communicating with. And lastly, if you click on Chat, also located at the bottom of the screen there, you should see a chat box appear around me, I suppose somewhere. Comments posted here are affected by a drop-down menu located directly above the text box. Depending on your selection, your comments may be viewed by either everyone here or by individual participants. Each time you post a comment into the chat, please double check your selection here so that your comment is seen by your intended audience. And with all that out of the way, I'll go ahead and hand the session off to Bernhard and Jesse. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Chris. Hey, Jesse.
Good morning, Bernard. Yeah, thank you, Chris. And welcome everyone back to our first Horn Camp Connect of this season. We're very glad to have you with us. And before we get started, I was just really enjoying listening to the trio that you heard leading up to the start of this session. That was Frank, Bernard, and I playing the Beethoven trio arranged for horns that we performed at Horn Camp in 2019. So I was really enjoying reminiscing about performing that. So
I was thinking the same thing, Jesse. I'm like, oh, this brings back so many amazing memories of making music in person, the camp itself, and now the three of us are reunited in this Horn Camp Connect. So
yeah, so it's really exciting that we can host Frank today and present the Lexicon. So I'm really looking forward to getting to that.
All right, well, we have limited time for this opening warm-up. We're going to have an abbreviated warm-up because Frank will need more time to go through this lexicon. So should we get started? Let's do it. All right, do some stretching to start. And remember, with all this stuff, do at your own pace. Don't feel like anything should be pushed. If you feel any forcing or anything, just stop. This is just a general guide. So within your own comfort zone, that's what we would have you all do. So,
yep.
Okay, so we're going to begin by just doing some stretching, limbering up. Do some twisting. Horn playing is a very physical activity. So the twisting is like this. Just go as far as you're able. We're just going to do 10 of these. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. Now we're going to do the fold over. Just going to get our back and torso opened up a bit here. Let's try to touch your toes. 10 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, and now we're going to do the side bends. And if you want, you can kind of grab your arm like this, like so. We're going to kind of pull it this way for the side bend, and we'll do 10 counts. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, almost done. We're just going to get this whole part up here kind of released. Lots of lactic acid can build up here, and we want to kind of just release all the tension. So we're going to do some arm rotations like that, backwards then forwards. Here we go, 10 for each way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and now forwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and lastly, to really get the stuff out, we're going to do some shoulder shrugs. So that just looks like that. Nice kind of neck massage for us. 10 backwards and forwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then forwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now we're limbered up for some breathing.
Awesome. Thanks, Bernhard. All right, so we're going to get started with some breathing, similar to exercises that we've done in the past. So we're going to do in 3 counts, out 3 counts, and then 4 counts, 5 counts, and 6 counts. This is very simple. We're going to go about quarter note equals 60, so about this tempo, okay? Feel free to breathe with a nice open throat, open syllable, okay, like an O. You can put your hand up and do this sort of breath. So you can hear that there's that really nice low whooshing. That means that there's no restriction. It's very open and the air is going very low. Okay, I'll demonstrate that one more time. Okay, getting the breath really nice and flowing. Okay, so we're going to do in 3, out 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so here we go. 1, ready, go. Out. In 4, out 4, in 5, out 5, in 6, out 6, good. Nice deep breath in and out. Get that air flowing for this morning. Excellent. Okay. Next we have spears, darts, and paper airplanes. All right. So I use these analogies to relate to a slow or pianissimo air, medium or mezzo, piano mezzo forte air, and then paper airplanes. I got that backwards. Paper airplanes is piano, darts is medium air, spears is fast or forte air, all right? So let's start with some paper airplanes. We're gonna float these on a nice, flowing, warm, round directional air, okay? So it's gonna look something like this. Nice, easy, controlled air. Let's float 2 paper airplanes, all right? Here we go. Awesome. One more paper airplane. Try to send it across the room as far as you can. Here we go. Second one. Awesome. Okay, next one is darts. Mezzo piano air, all right? So we're trying to send that dart about 10 feet in front of us right into the wall, okay? Very directional, very intentional, okay? It's going to look like this. So let's do 2 darts, all right? Right in the center of the bullseye. Here we go, first one. Good. Make sure that that air column has really good focus, really good direction in the center of your airstream, okay? Here we go. Nice supported dart. Second one. Awesome. Now the last one is spears. This is going to be forte or fortissimo air, all right? So if you hold a spear, there's quite a bit of weight in that spear, right? It's going to take quite a bit of momentum to get that spear going, but then it's going to sail, all right? That's the goal here. So a spear is going to look like this. So really send that spear flying. Let's do 2 of those, all right? First spear. Awesome. Second spear. Excellent. Okay, so these are all exercises from a book called Breathing Gym, also related to Brass Gym, developed by Sam Palafian, a tubist. Tuba players have to be all about their air capacity and their usage. So that's where these exercises come from. In the interest of time, should we move on to the next exercise, Bernhard?
Yeah, good idea, Jesse. Thanks so much. Okay,
Yeah.
ready to start to play the horn? And just keep in mind as we begin to make sounds on the instrument, we're also going to be drawing upon those breathing exercises. So it's not just the exercises we're doing, but we're also taking the breath into them as well. Thinking of them all as breathing and sound exercises. Okay, so first notes on the horn, we're just going to get a little bit going with a free buzz, so wherever it's easiest for you. Mine usually is a little bit lower to start. And Jesse's is oftentimes higher. Wherever it is, it's okay. And now we're just going to do a little bit in the mouthpiece, where again, wherever it's easy. I use an air attack. Just get it going. Everybody try that. And then on the horn, the first thing I'm going to do is just blow some nice, easy, warm air into the horn. Kind of like a seashell sounds. The reason I do that is just to prevent any sort of tension. If my air is too fast, it probably means I'm a little bit tense. So it's kind of for me. And then I, without a tongue, just sort of let that slow air become a sound. And as it becomes a sound, I begin to listen to it and really kind of take note about what I like about it, and maybe if I don't like some things about it, but it's all okay. So kind of like this, and maybe choose one of those easy notes I have written there, or something that's not difficult to produce. Good. Our goal at this point is really to just fall in love with our sound before we kind of begin to take it over the horn. So I encourage everyone to spend as much time as you need for that. And now we're going to move on to a way to build this, which is the Hododo.
What? So you're saying that you don't start with high C's for your first notes of the day?
You know, when I studied with the professor, he had me do that, but I've kind of, I can't do it anymore. I'm sorry.
All right, that's what I thought. I thought I'd recall that you'd done that at one time.
He just owned me. That's one of the reasons he did that, because I stopped doing that.
Oh, wow. All right. Sorry to hear that. Well, let's move on to Hododo. I need to get our metronome going here. So this exercise is developed, the name of this exercise is because this is the articulation that we're going to use as we play these 3 notes, right? Ho, do, do. So get it set to quarter note equals 60, and then we'll play this together. You can feel free to stay on the F horn if you're comfortable that way, but no need to. This is really just about getting our air flowing and our lips buzzing on the horn, all right? So let me get to our metronome, and then we'll get started. Okay. So I'll demonstrate the first one before we get started, just so you can hear what we're going to do. It's going to be like this. . And the first note of this is particularly important because you want to start with your air flowing and then get the buzz. So the first couple might end up being Hododo, and that's fine. We're trying to find that moment where the right velocity of air meets the buzz. All right? So let's do this as a group, starting with the first one on C. 1, 2, ready. D flat. D natural. E flat. E natural. F natural. F sharp. G natural. A flat. A natural. B flat. B natural. Last one, open C. Good. So I love this exercise. I talk to my students a lot about starting notes without the articulation, just air and buzz, right? So often I think as horn players, we get into the habit of thinking that notes have to start with the tongue. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do if I don't start with the articulation? All right, take the articulation out of the equation and just start with air and buzz. Once you can find that, you know, we start with hose, right? Maybe we end up with O's, right? Controlling the buzz. So, all right, that takes us into Song of the Day.
Thanks so much, Jesse. So now that our sound is working for us very, very well, it's always a good idea to try to put some tune or something musical, I think, near the front end of the warm-up, just because that's kind of the ultimate goal of what we're doing here is we're kind of preparing ourselves to play, but we also are playing music. So why not start to think musically as soon as possible? So we call this the Song of the Day and the Sing, Buzz, Create process. And so I chose this little tune that you probably all know. And the reason I chose it is I was practicing the beautiful sounds, which we'll do next. And I kind of noticed the pentatonic quality. Da, 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 dee, da, 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 dum. And I thought, well, it kind of sounds like a song. Da, 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 dee, da, da, dum. So I think everyone knows this. Someone to watch over me. And let's sing it together. You can sing it on La. You can sing it on Da. You can, if you know the words, which I don't think I know all the words actually, except for the very last part of it. We'll sing it first, and we really want to focus on expression and phrasing. Get connected to that, and then we're going to buzz it. Then we're going to play it, and then we might even do a little bit of creation with it. So, everybody, let's sing it. Everybody ready? 1 is the first note. 2, 3, 4. Da 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 Someone to watch over me. Such a nice song. All right, now let's try it in the mouthpiece. And we're going to play it exactly like we sang it. Okay? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Play it. Use whatever fingerings you like. There we go. 1, 2, 3. If you like this song enough, you could actually make an exercise out of it. You could actually turn this into the beautiful sounds if you want. So think about that. And we encourage you guys to choose a new song every day or every week, just something different in different styles. And then in terms of creation, I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do. You can add little ornaments. Something as simple as that, kind of like the jazz singers would do, or you can even do more if you want. Anyways, we should move forward into our beautiful sounds.
Oh, too bad we have to move on. I really want to hear you do more improv on that tune. It's always good. It's always good. Okay, so our next exercise is beautiful sounds. And it's called that because that's what it's intended to warm up, is our beautiful sound, right? I don't know about you, but I play the horn because I'm very much drawn to the sound. That's why I started playing the horn originally. And so I want to spend a little part of every day building that concept in my head, all right? And then getting it out my bell as much as I can. So the idea here is to really play with your ideal sound and really play through the phrase, spin your air, active, warm, beautiful playing, all right? For me, that's going to sound something along these lines. All right, so you see that there's a big slur underneath, but imagine that it's over the top, all right? So you want to think of your phrasing in your air and just this nice arc that goes from the beginning right to the end, all right? Always spinning your sound and your air, blowing through every note, stitching them all together, all right? We're not going to be able to get through all of the pages of this one today, but we can get through a couple lines at least. So I start on G, right? And then I do A flat, and then F sharp, and then A natural, and then F natural. And what I'm doing is I'm building my range like this as I go. So as I'm extending my way upward in the range, I'm also going down into the range of the horn. So I'm trying to really cover a wide area of my range on the instrument. Okay, so let's give this a try. Starting on G, if you can, try to do these lines in one breath, really tank up. Think about your lungs as a balloon, air going really low, okay? So, starting on G, all right, I'll count us off, 4 for nothing, here we go. 1, 2, ready. On A flat. F sharp, 6 sharps. A natural. F natural. B flat. E flat. Let's do one more on C. Good. So we'll stop there for today, but you get an idea of how this builds and how it should sound. Hopefully, a phrase that I repeat often and I really love is you can't make something sound easier by working harder. And so this should just be nice, easy playing.
Thanks, Jesse. And I'll be very brief with this harmonic slurring. We'll just do a few of them. And then the last thing we'll do is the scales. I think we can do it all of it in 3 minutes. So just very briefly with the harmonic slurring, we're building off what we just did with the beautiful sounds. With the first one, experiment with just kind of trying to use as little face as you can and as much air as you can. So I like to kind of bump into the little slots like this. Everyone can try that. And if you want to use the half whistle to kind of help us with the syllable, if you go full whistle is half whistle is, that kind of helps us with the syllable tongue position that we need as we kind of ascend and then descend. So that's the first one. The first one you can use to try it out, and then let's do the full rendition just for sake of time, everyone together. This is all in the open horn, and maybe we'll just do 2 of these. Just think the same kind of air quality we're using for beautiful sounds. Now we're just on the open horn, kind of expanding the range of it. So, everybody, 1, 2, okay. Good, we'll do one more, and then fingering 2. 1, 2, yeah. You can keep adding as many as you want. It gets a little faster on the next page, so feel free to try it all on your own. And then lastly, we're going to do our very abbreviated scale articulation exercise, which takes us through all the major scales. And on the way up, it's one scale. On the way down, it's the next scale up chromatically. So it's a little awkward to do at first, but in a pinch, my students say, "Oh, don't have time to practice my scales." It's like, you could do it in 30 seconds, actually, if you really wanted to. So let's try it. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Give it a shot. Mine probably won't be either. So in the spirit of the clam theme of the day. So, all right, so the tempo, we're going to start slow. You can use whatever articulation you want, ta, da, tu, do, whatever you prefer. About like that. Let's try it. 1, 2, ready? all your scales. And we are right on the money.
Nice job, Bernhard.
Thanks.
Yeah, 6 flats and on a line change is evil.
I know. Well, I mean, I was consulting the professor for this whole lecture, so limit on him. Well,
Yes, I really could feel that you were channeling him.
it's been a long time, but, comes pretty easy.
Awesome.
But
Well,
a special guest.
yes, absolutely. Go for it.
Okay, well, Frank Lloyd, I'm sure you all know him, and if you're like me, he's been an inspiration my whole life as a horn player, and we're just so honored to have him in the Horn Camp family and have him for live camp, and we're so pleased to welcome him as our special guest today. So welcome, Frank. Yay.
Thanks very much, Bernhard. It's great to be with you here today and to see so many of you with us. Now, I'm going to be taking a deeper look into the study of clamology with particular emphasis on the lexicon today. I mean, the foremost proponent in the study of the clam was the great Professor I.M. Gustaf Mitcheist. He spent much of his professional life studying the clam phenomenon and subsequently developed a list of the many forms of clams in his Lexicon of Clamology. He was an elusive character, by all accounts, but who, together with his brilliant young student Kendall Betts, did many a workshop presentation on the science of clamology with special reference to the lexicon, explaining the nomenclature of the many listed and recognized clams, and indeed demonstrating how they might sound in real life. We'll get to the clams in a moment, but first I wanted to say how delighted I am to have been able to enlist the help of a good friend and self-confessed expert in this area today, and himself an ex-student of Kendall Betts, our very own Bernhard Scully. Bernhard, thanks so much for offering to help out today. Now, Kendall was your professor, and our beloved Kendall Betts Horn Camp bears his name, of course, and you could say the very reason we're all here today. Can I ask when you were first introduced to the great Professor Gustaf Mitcheist and how that might have influenced your early years as a horn student?
Well, sure. Thank you, Frank. And I'm very proud of my lineage and my legacy. My teachers, like all of our teachers, are so important. And what you may not know, actually, is that even though Kendall was a student of the professor, he actually fell out of favor with the professor after a while. And when I first began studying with Professor, this happened as well. I was actually a protege. Like, the professor heard me play when I was very young, and he actually took me under his wing, and I had a real special relationship with him. But like Kendall, after a while, we both, unfortunately, our relationship began to dissolve over time. But we still claim his lineage and are very proud of it. So.
That's lovely. Great. It's good to know a little bit of the history. Mm-hmm. Well, you very kindly offered to help me out today in that you're going to be demonstrating the clams.
Yes.
No feat in itself, I might add.
Well, as I said, I used to be an expert. I mean, I still consider myself an expert as part of my research at the university, the study of clamology. It's ancient science. And in doing this, it really reminded me about, when I had this expert skill, it wasn't as easy as I felt it. What I want to say is I hope you excuse some of the clams because they're not quite as well rendered as I used to be able to do them when I was studying with the professor. But I think they're good enough.
Good. Work in progress then, okay.
Yeah, it's work in progress. I really need to get back to it, but I did my very best. So hopefully everybody will just be kind today. So.
Right. Okay, well, we'll get to those in due course. I'm going to start with a story. Several years ago, a somewhat naive TV presenter in Germany was interviewing members of the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra for a documentary. She put this question to the then principal, Gert Seifert, the principal horn, that is. I understand a horn is a very difficult instrument to play. Can you tell me what it actually feels like to play a wrong note? I wouldn't know, he said. You'll have to ask one of my colleagues. I thought that was a brilliant answer, and actually not wholly untrue, as he was an astonishingly accurate player. He hardly ever played a wrong note. But what about the rest of us? Are we to be forever consigned to the clam chowder of wrong notes and forever destined to have to suffer the ignominy and embarrassment of playing wrong notes every now and again? Well, call them what you like, clam, split, crack, blooper, cock up. They seem to be pretty much an accepted hazard in playing the horn, aren't they? Well, or are they? I mean, Gert Seifert was, and many others are, astonishingly accurate and hardly ever play any wrong notes. What makes people like them so much better than the rest of us? Innate talent, good technique, no nerves? Well, maybe it's a bit of all three, but more to the point, what can we do to recognise what's behind our own mistakes? And what can we do to make our own playing more accurate? I'm going to endeavour today to take a serious look at what might be the reasons for things going wrong, and offer some ways we might be able to, if not eradicate clams completely, at least mitigate their frequency. Now, any clam is a result of an underlying problem. Compromised airflow, wrong lip tension position, lack of concentration, tonguing problems, wrong fingering, headache, hangover. But whatever the reason, it's important for us to recognise those that lead to our mistakes, not least in order to avoid it happening next time. One of the most common clams, the first one up, is the so-called no-speaky. A late entrance due to the lack of vibration of the embouchure, considered by most horn players to not be a true clam. Wonderful. Well, clam or not, it's certainly embarrassing to blow and nothing come out, or for the note to just fade away before the end, but that's another clam, we'll get on to that. One straightforward reason is that the lips are too far apart. But it's not always as simple as that, as there are several other things going on that could be behind a no-speaky, some more prevalent in the low register and others in the high. So let's first get down to some basics. One of the main reasons for notes not speaking at all is the lack of focus or centre to the note. Every note on the instrument has only a certain tolerance or space, you can call it real estate if you like, in which it belongs and it lives. Any note will therefore only give you its best, sound its best, and be most secure when it sits in the middle of this zone. Anywhere outside of this sweet spot will result in compromising the stability, intonation, and resonance and tone quality of that note. But in order to use this space, we have to first create it by removing any impediments that can constrict it, namely the tongue and the throat. So the lower notes, owing to their greater distance apart, have understandably more tolerance than the higher ones because they own more real estate. The higher ones, on the other hand, being closer together, are inherently more prone to cracking. So, can we take it that then the lower notes are inherently safer and more secure than the higher ones? Well, they are in a way. I mean, don't be fooled. Any low horn player will tell you that there are plenty of hairy moments in the low horn repertoire. They're certainly not just reserved for the high players. The notes themselves might be more secure as far as pitching goes, but having good nerves, a good air control support, and all the rest are as equally important as they are in the high register. We want to think of our air as the fuel, our support as the gas pedal or the driving force to produce that air, and our tongue as the ignition or the starter motor. You could take this analogy further for those older folks with us today, in that we could think of the throat as the choke, no pun intended, which we used to open to create a richer fuel mixture, just what we need on the horn. So basically, the more fuel we have available, the easier it is for the lips at the front end to do their job. Airflow is, after all, the only thing they understand and can respond to. Let's look, first of all, at no speakies in the low register. Here's a couple that could be caused by the embouchure being too open. And this one maybe? Oh dear. Well, they were purely down to the reason that the lips were too far apart. Basically, we want to keep the throat open at the back and keep the tongue down and out of the way, maintaining that warm, thick air at all times. But in order to sustain this, we need to understand that the support structure, what that's all about. In my experience, I found that many horn students don't really understand the workings of the support and how absolutely essential it is. Well, first and foremost, there's no magic involved. We use the same muscles all the time for other things. Let's try an exercise. I want you to place your hands on either side of your ribs, under your ribs, along your waist, and feel what happens when you laugh. Come on, don't be shy. There's only us here, me and you. I know there's lots of me and you, but let's try it together. You feel the muscles that are working just by laughing. And we should be doing these every day. I know times have been hard, but things are getting better. What happens when you stop? You automatically breathe in. It's a total natural process. Breathing out and relaxing is just as important as breathing in. Now, these very same muscles, in the very same way, are the ones we use to support the air when we play. We think, ha, 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 open your throat like yawning, ha, ha, and feel those muscles working. So it feels as natural as possible. There's no trickery involved. You don't even have to think about the support as such, just the process of laughing inside, which automatically engages the right muscles. All very natural, with the added advantage of keeping happy at the same time. Anyway, so now we have the support, or at least the concept of support. We'll go to the next step, just starting notes with the support and without the tongue. Now, we've already just done this, and this is underlying the importance of this particular exercise, starting the note by just using the air. The tongue can create many problems, and if we can develop this air attack, it can help us in a lot of different situations. So we want to just start the air moving, just like a no speaky at the beginning, but we're looking for the association of and the coordination of the air with the vibrations of the lips. Just try a few different notes, like in the middle G of the instrument. So when we start the air moving, we want to feel exactly where that start point is, and that's where we want to learn. This is where we learn the muscle memory where the note is actually starting, and we're going to coordinate this in the next step with the articulation, so we get that start point absolutely exact. So let's try just on in the low G. So we want to think very open in the back, like yawning, and keep the tongue down out of the way. So as we make it a small crescendo and back in the diminuendo, try and remember not to manipulate that diminuendo in any way. Just keep that air flowing and keep that position from the beginning to the very end. That's just one note as an example, but try and incorporate them into your daily long note practice. So basically, the more you relax and holding everything on that support, the easier it will be. We want to think that we're letting it happen and not trying to make it happen, because any manipulation of the airflow will confuse the front end and make their job more difficult. I used to have huge problems with low notes, and I used to wonder why they never worked for me. They used to sound awful. I used to get this problem. I noticed that one of my younger colleagues in the Royal Marines Band could play them better than I could, which eventually got me to practice them correctly. The problem was trying to manipulate the diminuendo and change something which messed up the airflow in the process. The tipping point was always at the highest point of the crescendo, just about to start the diminuendo. So I learned very quickly that doing less is better, by not trying to make the diminuendo work. Just maintain that position, not changing anything. And this will hold through for any long note you've got, not trying to manipulate the diminuendo. It's an all-important part of a fundamental practice. Getting this feeling of controlling the aniente diminuendo will help in so many different situations. So let's now coordinate this with the tongue. So we feel where the note starts, and we can just start this articulation at that very point. So without the tongue, and with, want to get the feeling of da, da. Practice that you get that really clean attack, so it doesn't sound blurred, blur. In a way, we want to release the tongue very quickly so the airflow can get to the front of the lips undisturbed, because it's the problem with the tongue that often gets in the way of the release of the air that creates this blurry attack. Blah, blah. We want to drop the tongue very quickly so the air can get forward and do its job. So basically there's 4 parts to the articulation of a note. You've got the preparation, the breathing in, engaging the support and placing the tongue. The attack, releasing that air, either with the tongue or with just the support. The follow through, keeping the air active and supported. And the tail off, controlling to the point when you want the note to end. Not stopping it with the tongue, of course, but just taking that airspeed down quickly so the note always has a nice tail and not an abrupt stop. Let's get on to some exercises. I've written some exercises down for you. Very basic, sheet 1A. If we could bring that up. Great, there we are. So, we want to feel where the focus is when slurring into these notes so that they speak immediately and cleanly. You know, developing the flexibility to move between the centers of these notes will assure they stir cleanly and easily. You can use different sides of the horn as well. That can help. Quite often we've got some awkward slurs in this area. Don't be scared to change the horn between the F and B flat. It can make some particularly awkward slurs very much smoother and very much easier. So these exercises, let's do first 2 different versions. The first one will be very legato, dee, o, do, dee, dee. So you're stroking that attack each time and not really too much articulation. So it's going to sound like this. Try and take that last note out for as long as you can. Keep active with the support and keep that air going right to the very end. And this is what I mean by the aniente diminuendo, that we diminuendo until the air runs out. If we've got that absolute sweet spot and we're in the middle and we just keep that air moving, we should be able to use that air to the very end of the phrase. And that shows us that we've got it absolutely optimal with the support and with that beautiful, open, warm and thick airflow. So let's go to the next one. things to look out for in the diminuendo is that if you start hearing any air in the sound or any crackle, it means that you've compromised the airflow in some way and the lips are telling you that they're not getting enough. Not more speed, but more real estate, so they can keep nice and clean. To making sure you're hearing always a nice clean tone, however quiet it gets, will tell you that you've got that position just right. Now to reiterate quickly about that thick warm air, I forgot just to say that, you know, we've already done this exercise when we can hear the depth in the inrush of the air, shows that we're really nice and open. So when we blow out, we want to be also just as open as we're breathing in. So do this with an open throat and bring the tongue down on the back of your hand. You feel the warmth. Now if you try and close your throat somewhat and push the tongue up, you get a much narrower airstream, which is then much cooler. So that's the position of our throat. It's the same breathing in as breathing out. Keeping it open, like yawning. So there's a few exercises to be going on with there. You can take them right down to the lower notes right at the bottom and then continue with fingered notes right down as far as you can go, always bearing in mind that you're looking for the clean articulation each time with the repeated notes and the aniente diminuendo, so you're really practicing that support and continued airflow. Now in sheet 1B, we can also take this down to the low F sharp, but it's the same treatment as before. So we've got, let's try this one then with the more articulation. I tend to play these on one fingering for each phrase, which is on the B flat horn, starting open. You can use your normal fingers if you like. The rules are the same. Okay, I can't hear you when you're playing it with me, but let's go on to the second one. Try and get a good 8 beats, 8 counts on the very last note. Next one, E flat. If you keep supported, keep nice and open and the tongue out of the way, you'll feel how easy that is. All you need to do is just breathe out. Remember what we said about the support? Keep that active and that will help you all the way through. Now let's try the starting on the D with the legato articulation. Notice however quiet it gets, it stays clean and warm. That's because the airflow is open, clean and warm, and that maintains that note also clean until the very end. The sheet 1C is just going to increase the difficulty. So in my experience and in my own playing, I have great difficulty with re-articulating notes in the low register. And this helps us with some exercises in that particular register. Maintain that position the whole way, so there's nothing changing. we're articulating with the tongue and then get the tongue immediately out of the way so the air can do the job. And that ease of the last note will tell us that we've got the right position. And then we'll work down in semitones just like we did before. And of course, they will get more difficult as we get lower. So that's something you can take away with you and do practice in your own time. So let's go on to no speakers in the high register. One of the most common questions I get is how to play quieter in the high register without the note disappearing. Well, generally speaking, there's several things going on here. Air speed, the dynamic, air volume, the amount of air, and the lip tension. These three have to be balanced to achieve optimal results. To help playing high in piano or pianissimo, try to avoid squeezing the airflow by constricting the throat or by pushing the tongue up towards the roof of the mouth. I used to have terrible problems, and it took me a long time to get out of these bad habits. You know, by pushing the tongue up or constricting the throat, it limits the amount available of the air available for the lips, compromising their ability to work efficiently. It's important to know that what governs the pitch of the note to the greatest extent is the tension of the embouchure, not the speed of air. Although obviously they need each other, but the piano dynamic is that same warm, thick air, just slow air. Some of you might be saying, but my teacher tells me to do this and do that, which is different to what you're telling me. Well, yeah, I understand that, but I'm not saying that it won't work using other methods. All I'm trying to show you is that how to be efficient with your breathing and support, and how to recognize the pitfalls that could be the reasons for things going wrong or making things more difficult for you. So basically, we want to be able to achieve these optimal results with the least amount of effort. Constricting the airflow with the tongue, for instance, will immediately compromise the resonance of the note. We need the resonance chamber, the openness here, make that note less secure, and shut the door on any dynamic control at all. So you might have heard players that sound pretty good, but they lack a center and warmth to the sound, lacking that intensity that gets you right here. Well, that's the reason why. So, when the note stops or becomes difficult to play quietly at all, is either because the embouchure doesn't have the strength to maintain the faster vibrations with the slower air, or the airflow has been compromised, like with the tongue squeezing up or closing the throat. This results in not enough air being able to maintain the vibrations at the front end. The slower the air gets, the more real estate it needs, the more space, not less. So, in a moment of panic, feeling the note about to disappear, you push more air through in an effort to keep the lips vibrating, which in turn increases the volume again. That's the catch-22. The very reason it's easier to play louder in the upper register is because the airstream is faster, which helps the embouchure to vibrate faster. But when the air slows down in piano, we need more strength in the embouchure to keep those vibrations fast. The strength you have in the embouchure will in the end govern how quiet you can play in the upper register. A weaker embouchure will require faster air to vibrate because they can't hold the tension. Therefore, the dynamic will be correspondingly louder. So I've put some exercises together for you to help increase that strength in the embouchure required to play quietly in the upper register. It's a good idea in these to take the finger hook off so that you don't cheat by pushing too much here. I also had a terrible habit of too much pushing. It was all my years marching in the Marine Band got me into these habits. So take your finger off so you're not going to fall into that trap. So exercise sheet 2A. I've missed out the first one, but we can actually start with just the open C. I start on the C sharp, but we could start on the C like this. Finger off. And more articulated. Again, check with that last note that you have that position, and you can nice and easily keep that air flowing, and the note will just continue right through to the end. Let's move up a half step. I suggest playing these on the B flat horn, then you don't have to change your fingerings. And so on, using those two different articulations, the legato and the more articulated. You'll see that I've just written at the end there, we continue F sharp, G, A flat, A, B flat, B, right up to your high C. Don't be in a rush to get there. Take your time. So it always is very easy. When you get into the part of the register that's getting more difficult, well, then stay there for a while until that becomes very easy. It's a process of developing the muscles that we need to play easily in the upper register. They don't come from one day to the next. You can't run a marathon tomorrow. You have to train for it. And we're dealing with muscles that need to be trained in a continued and systematic way through exercises, just like this. So listen to the sound in the diminuendo always. If it's crackly or unstable, that's telling you that there's not enough real estate in the air and the lips are complaining, struggling to keep vibrating with the dwindling resources. So that's very good. Exercise 2A.
Frank, a quick question.
Yes, sir.
So Marcus Bertel posted in the chat, he's curious if these exercises would be beneficial to do on the mouthpiece alone.
Of course, anything is always good on the mouthpiece alone, and it's sometimes difficult with the mouthpiece getting up into the upper register. I've discovered that I use a little mouthpiece shank, which gives me more security. Some people use a little piece of hose as well. Like with my mouthpiece, if I use this short shank, I get this. Much more definition and much more ease in. It's just because this is so short. It's very much more unstable. So I tend to use this little shank with my mouthpiece, which gives me much more definition. But of course, I'm all for using the mouthpiece in the warm up and to help get the focus and to get the embouchure working. Thanks.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
So I'm going to a quick mention of slurs and the use of the tongue and the glottis or the throat. To avoid a glissando when we slur, we need to control the amount of air that we release between the two notes, especially when they get the larger intervals from about an octave. Actually, you might have listened some people close up, but you can you can hear the glottis moving. So if you think we've got two notes, D, if we just leave the throat open and let the slur from one note to the other, then we'll get all of the harmonics in between. So if we think da, ya, to help that clean it up, to get a much cleaner slur. Sorry about my hands. A quick slur helps. If we take too long over the slur, we'll tend to get more of a glissando effect. So think of jumping up to that higher note, a much quicker slur, so we don't hit so many notes in between. That's also good to practice different fingerings as well, especially as it gets higher. We're going to move on to the next clam, the thwop, falling off to below the pitch at the end of the last note of a passage, usually in diminuendo. This is a common clam caused by a weak or fatigued embouchure, or by not maintaining the airflow lip tension in the diminuendo, or indeed the support. We'll always come back to this. Exactly what we've just been talking about. Some of the most tiring things to play are quiet, not loud. A friend asked me some years ago, how can I sit in my symphony orchestra all day, play all day without getting tired, when I can't get through the first movement of the Brahms horn trio? Well, that quiet, sustained playing is a very different discipline and requires more stamina. It's different to power. A good analogy is the difference between sprinting 100 meters and running the marathon. When I was playing in the Royal Philharmonic for a few years, we had a sub come in for a tour we were doing. He usually played in a chamber orchestra. For the first day's rehearsal, he just about knocked everything over for the simple fact he wasn't used to playing with so much power. Of course, after a couple of days, he was fine. So, likewise, the thwap, next clam. Sailing to above the pitch on the end of the last note of a passage, usually in diminuendo. Heard that one many times. Well, caused by squeezing the note in the diminuendo or pushing the tongue up, which indeed can speed the air up. At the same time, it sends the message to the lips to vibrate faster, hence the thwap, the slide to the note above. It's really important not to squeeze the air in a diminuendo. We want to keep that thick, warm air nicely supported. So in the case of squeezing or narrowing of the air column, that forces the airflow through a narrow opening, which in turn increases its speed, forcing the lips to respond. That's all they're doing. They slip up to the next harmonic. They're only doing what we're telling them. We can't blame them. They're only responding to the airflow we send them. Listen to the sound you're making, especially on the last note of these exercises. If it stops before the air's finished, dies an early death in a shower of crackling and fluff, then that's telling you we haven't quite got that position right, and there's still work to do. The most common culprit with all these clams is nearly always the lack of support. Sorry to reiterate this point, but when we lose the support, the control is left to the throat and the tongue, which then compromise the very airflow we want to keep undisturbed. We need to trust it. These new feelings might be unnerving at the beginning, but once you get used to them, they actually make things much easier. You'll start believing in them and gain more confidence in their implementation. Next clam is the whip. We've got a thwap. Like at the beginning with the note speaky, the thwap is the note disappearing towards the end, and that's just simply because we haven't maintained that position. If we forget our support, then what happens? You try and control it up here, you close off here, and it shuts down, and the note just finishes. If we keep that nice and open the air, and enough air, enough real estate is always going to be there to maintain that airflow to the lips. So we'll go on to the sweep. Sweep. Soft miss of a note from either above or below, usually only heard and noticed by your colleagues in the horn section, and not the conductor or the audience. Well, when it's really soft and hardly noticeable, it's about as close as you get to a clam, but just about getting away with it. You could call it a very slight blur on the note, so that it doesn't actually sound like a wrong note. You're lucky if your clams only ever sound like this. I mean, next time you might not be so lucky. So it's a good idea to work on getting better clarity with the articulation, because these slight blur to the notes are telling you that you haven't quite got that center. Let's move on to the Splat. The loud miss of a note from either above or below, either upon entrance or in the course of a passage, must have an indefinite pitch at its inception before arriving on the printed note. Could be caused perhaps by wrong fingers, not fully depressed. You know, it's a difficult one, this. Maybe you've had too much to drink on this one. Because normally we have very defined cracks. These very subtle yam with no defined front, no definition to the clan would seem to me that there's a slight problem with the fingering. So you haven't got your fingers quite depressed. So we get yam, so the note doesn't really speak correctly. I've had one experience which was absolutely the biggest shock in my life. After the introduction of the Brahms first symphony, you've got, and it goes into the Allegro, the 6/8, and it goes bomb, bida, and the third horn go bum, and really loud on this D flat. Well, I was very confident and came in flat out on this D flat, only to my shock and horror that my water key had just stuck open. And if you've ever tried to play a D flat with your water key open, it doesn't work. So the feeling of something not happening when you're absolutely totally confident that it will is the biggest shock you're ever going to get, because for a start you don't know what it is. It's not a clam as such. It's just some horrible sound that comes out which you've never heard before in your life, and it's you producing it. Well, that's one of the occupational hazards that you just can't foretell. It's just one of those things that happens, and you just say, well, no one will believe you, of course. You say, well, sorry, my water key's stuck open. I've got rid of my water keys, actually. I've got these joy keys, so it just lets the water out at the same time, although they've stopped working. Okay, let's go on to the Splat. A loud miss of a note from above must have a definite pitch at its inception, similar to a Baroque appoggiatura in sound. Yeah, could be called an accidental. Perfect. One of the most common clams, this one. Let's look at some possible causes. Pitching problems. You know, we have to be able to hear the notes. We need a good inner ear. A good relative pitch, we can't even guess, because we've got such the potential to clam in the upper register. We need to be able to hear everything here before we start. That's one of the most important things, and that's why we do a solfege and ear training, so that we've really got that, not only the feeling here, but also that relative pitch working for us, that we can hear that note regardless of what's happening around us. I mean, quite often you'll be in a situation where everything will be so loud you won't know whether you're playing at all, because you won't hear. And then we need that muscle memory and this inner ear to tell us that we are playing the correct note. Now we have also problems with the tonguing. Remember I mentioned earlier on about getting a clean attack, and that by tonguing not optimally in the correct position will create that blurry attack, something like we hear that very blurred attack. That's because I'm putting the tongue between the lips when I attack. What this does is prevent the air from reaching the lips in a solid block. So it starts the lips vibrating before the actual main body of air behind reaches them. So they have a sort of tentative start. In this case, think a little bit higher with the tongue. So ta or da, da, da. So practice finding that absolute sweet spot with the tongue, so there's no audible blur at all. You could also, one of the problems is snatching the attack too early, before you're actually ready to attack the note, anticipating it, not getting that feeling of here play, but too soon. Before you've set that embouchure and you've got that focus in place, then that can also be a reason that it goes wrong. The same with holding the air and creating a stutter or creating that tension, which will result in an uncontrolled expulsion of air, which can result in a clam like that. Also, tightening the opening before pushing a lot of air, especially in a forte, was sort of overcooking the attack or overpowering it. You know, something like sorry if I overdid the microphone there, but that's overpowering it. So what you're doing is pushing more air through than you've left space for. So that pushes this front end here faster. We go into the next note. Or worse still, do what a friend of mine did recently. Again, overpowering it and leaving not enough space for that fortissimo air that you need, and that pushes it up to the next note. Can be very embarrassing. So when playing loud in the high register, there's a direct correlation between the amount of real estate you've created for the air and the aperture and tension of the armature. The more air you have available and have the space for, the bigger and louder you'll be able to play as a consequence. This will become less by degrees the more you limit or constrict the amount of air available by closing the throat, for instance. You know, have you ever reached a point in a crescendo that feels like it's in a cul-de-sac? I used to remember I was terrible because I had too much tension here. You've reached a point and the note just won't get any louder. You know, I used to suffer from this a lot, as everything was just simply too tight. I was always very secure, but habitually too tight in the throat. It took me years to realise what was going on and how to correct it, which was difficult as a professional. Signs of a misspent youth, perhaps. So, to reiterate, louder dynamics require more airspeed and space. The reason the dynamic becomes restricted is because there's not enough air available to get through the restriction that you've created in your throat. You know, by forcing it through this narrower gap, it's like a fireman's hose with so much pressure. You're trying to get through a garden hose. It's completely then overpowered. It will force the intonation up and will result then in a loud thwap like we've just heard, when there's just simply too much power for the amount of space that you've left for it. You know, the note will just flip to the next harmonic above. In this case, not in the diminuendo in the thwap, but in the fortissimo. We're going to try a test just to show you what is actually happening so you can feel it for yourselves. I want you to start this note, a middle G, in piano, and I want you to close the throat somewhat so it's tight, maybe lift the tongue up a little, so and then I want you to force the air through, absolutely fortissimo, and see what happens. So I'll show you first. Just overpowering that. There's just not enough space for that fortissimo air. So what it does is force the air faster at this end, and they respond, faster air, we've got to go faster. There's not the space, there's not the real estate, so they'll go up to the next harmonic. When you try that yourselves. Now try this. Open the throat, drop the tongue, start the note exactly the same, put more power through, and if you keep this nice and open, then you'll have much more control. So the moment you get more real estate, more room, then there's much more space for the air to do its work, and we don't have to force it. And this will be important for the whole range of the instrument, keeping these restrictions out of the way, to maintain that position at all times. It might need working on. These might be new things for a lot of you, but I mean, that's why we're here. Let's go on to another exercise. Exercise sheet 2B, or not to be. 1 and 2. Yeah, this one. Let's have a look. How are we? Great. So you see, I've marked it at a full dynamic at the beginning. Play it slowly, so we've always got that long last note to check and maintain that we've got the support and that airflow right. I won't play quite so loudly in the fortissimo, but just to show you what's happening. Again, take that finger off the hook, so we're not going to create any pressure. Okay, shall we try the next one? Maybe a little bit more articulated. And so on. These are another set of exercises that you can take away and practice, always bearing these things in mind. The connection between the quiet and the loud. Basically, if we've got that space, we're using our support, so we've always got the real estate there. The difference between loud and quiet is only the airflow. We don't have to think about anything else because we've got the space there, just like that we did with that little practice on that G. So we get the feeling of being too tight and overpowering very easily, but by opening everything and supporting that at all times keeps that real estate there, which will always enable us to use that air in any way we like. Slow, thick and warm for our piano, and much more fortissimo in the very same phrase like this, without doing anything. The same with our long notes, starting pianissimo, making a massive crescendo, diminuendo, but always in this control and checking the position on that last note so we maintain that support and that airflow, so we can diminuendo and niente at the end, always under control. So we control exactly when the end of the note comes. So obviously most notes we play aren't going to be until the very end of the air. It's going to be a certain length. So we want to be able to control exactly where we taper the end without artificially ending it in any way, like closing off or, God forbid, pushing the tongue up and tongue stopping, just by controlling that air. So there's those few exercises. They will take you right up to the high C. So again, a fair bit of work there.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello? Is anybody there? Good. So we've got then exercise 2B, which is going to, there we are, go up, up, up. Okay, great. That's a long process. Again, it's not something you're going to do, most of you anyway, are going to be able to do in one day. It's working at building the strength required, always being very vigilant about how we're practicing and what we're hearing. We don't want to think of it as just input. I mean, students can be lazy and just go for input, not really listening to what's coming out. Listening to what's coming out, that's telling you exactly what's going in. So always look for absolute clean articulation. Anything that's not centered will tell you that you haven't got that clean articulation right, and the release of that air. Ugly slurs, make sure that your slurs are clean and that you haven't got this glissando effect, and you've got the ease of playing fortissimo right the way down to piano at the end, and then holding and maintaining the airflow for that very last note, so you've got that control right through to the pianissimo at the end. You know, getting these working will get you through any problems in the repertoire. There's absolutely no doubt that is, and because it makes things very much easier, you gain in self-confidence. So you get much more stronger as a player, and you don't get scared about these difficult, quiet things in the upper register because it's very much easier. And the joy of playing in the high register when it becomes so much easier is a great feeling, because it's that one thing that we get scared about all the time. And then that tends to tense up, and that's going to create exactly these problems that we're talking about. Let's go on to the next clam. With a splia or a splee? No, or a splia. That's the next one, a splui. There we are, a splia. No, that's it. So a loud note of a miss, the loud miss of a note from above must have a definite pitch at its inception.
I think we just did this one.
We've done that. Have we done that? Yeah, that was the one that sounded like is an accidental.
I think we're on splui.
That's a splui. Are we going to hear a splui? Same as a splia, but from below. Bernhard, what does this sound like? I would put this down mainly to flexibility, not getting absolutely in the center of this note before attacking it. So you're a little bit preempting that attack, and you haven't got quite the embouchure in the correct position. So that's why you're knocking it over, clamming from underneath. You just haven't got that set. You know, lazy or unconcentrated can be the causes, you know. Apart from many of the other things as well we've talked about. So let's move on. Let's move on to the Spladat. Oh, Spladat, a very rapid splat. Can be doubled into a Spladat, or tripled and quadrupled as well. The sky's the limit on this one, it says. When enough Spladats are coupled together, that the pitch of the printed note is never distinguished, it becomes a spladatando. How very interesting. Now, what might that sound like? Thank you, Bernhard. Excellent rendition there. So multiple compounded clams like this, I think, are caused by rapid corrections of the lips. Yeah, but in that time frame of the duration of the note, never quite center the note before having to move on to the next. It's like you've recognized that you've moved on to another note, and then you correct it, but you correct too far and it goes the other way, and then you correct again and it comes back, and by the time you found the note that you wanted, and you've actually moved on to the next note. Can also be caused actually by a dodgy note on the instrument. You know, there's some instruments which have insecure notes. Fortunately, not so many these days, as most instruments are really very, very secure. But I have still come across lots of instruments that have duff notes on them. You know, difficult to center or very tight sounding, and they can be the cause for clams, of course, not least because you get worried about them. You get a thing about them, and then it makes it even more difficult. I had a student once. I was in South America, in Chile, doing some master classes, and this young girl had terrible problems with an instrument, and the top A wasn't working at all. She was quite a good player, but there wasn't a high A on the instrument. Yeah, I picked up the instrument and played it, and of course it didn't exist. There wasn't a high A on the instrument at all. And the other poor girl that was there had terrible trouble. She couldn't get this particular note in the school band, and they were all feeling very sorry for her. And it was just a middle note on the instrument, just a middle A or something. And she was so distraught about this wrong note. So she said, "Can you help me? I can't get this note." And it was just right in the middle of the instrument. So I looked at her horn, tried to play this note. No, didn't exist. And the horn looked fine, double horn. And then I started trying to work it out, and it had recently been in a workshop in the local town, and they would put the horn back together as we recognise a double horn with the F valves, with the F tubes on the top. Well, actually, that instrument was built the other way around. So the F tubes are actually on the bottom and the B flat sides were on the top. So they'd put them in the wrong way round. So this poor girl had been trying to get this note in the middle, using completely the wrong fingers. It just wasn't working at all. So all we did was change around the slides, and she got a round of applause at the next rehearsal because she could get this middle note. It was great. Poor girl. So let's move on to the next clam. Oh, Sploink. A very long no-speaky on an entrance where the listener and player are kept in suspense as to whether the note will speak. Sometimes coupled with a splee, splui, spladat to become a sploinkter. How very interesting. I want to hear what this sounds like. Well, going back to where we started with getting a note to start without the tongue, for this very reason, it's a great asset to have, that you can feel that note and just release that air. After all, when you think about it, it's the same air we use it whether we articulate it or not. We should basically be able to start any note with just the air. It's the same air as we would use if we were going to articulate it. So that's why it's really important to work at these air attacks to get the absolute center of the note without having to use the tongue. It's a problem if we feel that we have to use the tongue to start the note. That shows me that there's problems with the support, because without the support, we come up to here and then we try and control everything from here, when basically it should be working primarily from the support. But so we've done some good work on that, and I can't say more that how important that is to get that really working well. I was asked once, not often been asked this, but I was asked to play without attacking a note in the slow movement of the Brahms. The very first entry of the horn is on that written G for an F horn, but the violinist wanted to start with a slower bow. So he didn't want the horn to come in. So he asked me to play that without the tongue. Or to get away from that bump of a start, because in the violin he wasn't going ba, it was very gentle. So we could match the attacks like that, which is very interesting, and of course then not something you're going to be asked very often, but it's really good to have that start. Like the very first no speaky in the Oberon. It's great to be able to start that without a bump, just breathe it. It's right in the middle of the instrument. It's not a difficult note, but just to start with the air so it comes from nowhere and hasn't have a defined start bar, but just comes from nowhere. Very beautiful effect and really, really important. Let's have a look. Moving on. I think we've got a splink. Splink. Or is that a sploink? These could be German words, couldn't they? I suppose coming from the Professor Gustaf Mitcheist is that's why they do like they are. So we've got a splink, a sploink, occurring in the middle of a passage, sometimes coupled with a splir, splui, spladat to become a splinkter. Bernhard?
Sorry, that was the last clam.
Yeah, I thought that.
Yeah. What about let's try this option.
That sounded to me like a splui, I think, which is the encircling of the printed note from above and below, never quite getting on the pitch, but clearly marking the pitch of the note above and below. Usually occurs in the middle of a slow passage, but occasionally upon entrance, like we just heard. I'm going to nickname this.
We're very lucky. Bernhard is just so competent at performing these clams. He actually gave us another example of a shplui, if you would like to hear it.
Okay, let's hear that one. Wonderful. I admire the tenacity. Security over the whole range of the instrument, and the subtleties of changing notes smoothly from the middle of one note to the middle of the next is something we should be practicing every day. In the slurs, some harmonics slur better than others, so don't be afraid to use alternative fingerings to make something a little bit easier. We haven't got just one fingering for everything. We've got two sides of the instrument that we can use to our own advantage and to make things easier. So that was brilliant. We're going to move on because time is running on and we've got just a few more clams, and we're going to open up for some questions and anything else. Let's go on to some additions to the original list, and this one is called a Schwupsi, which is a very quick alternation between the main note and the note above, then back to the main note again, occurring frequently after a large slur or jump upwards, also downwards, when it is called a Schwupsi. This can also happen when forcing the note in fortissimo, which we've done already, but it will invariably force the note upwards. Remember what we did with that. Let's have a look, have a listen. Okay, good. Two good examples there. The first one is that when we slur upwards and we arrive at the upper note just at the very top edge of the note, and what happens, the note flips briefly onto the next harmonic before dropping back down again to the original note. And the other one is clipping that lower note, that seventh harmonic, because again we've not quite reached the note before we've released that full airflow, and we get that grazing of the note from underneath. Again, they can be very, very quick. That's the quick adjustment of the lips to correct the mishap. Let's go on to the next one. Oh, a Schlurpy. This goes between two slurred notes when the note above the second note is clipped when slurring, either when moving up or down. You know, this is a tricky register on the horn, because these particular slurs are going between two unfriendly harmonics. In this case, like an F to an F sharp is going, or from the E to the F sharp, we're moving from an eighth to a ninth harmonic, and they're not so friendly. So what is happening if you've pushed a little bit too much to go on to the next note, then that eighth harmonic is very apt to jump to the next friendly harmonic, which is the 10th harmonic, which is that G sharp and not the F sharp. The same with moving from the F to the F sharp. It's the same thing that's going on. It's the difference between the 8th and the 9th harmonic. So just a little bit too much movement, tiny bit of too much movement within the embouchure, and it will flip to the next friendly harmonic. You could be more noticeable in the lower register between like two incompatible slurs like 4 and 5. In any of those intervals between 4 and 5, your lips really want to go to the next friendly harmonic, which is the 6th. Really hear that awkward bump going into that next adjacent harmonic, and it's the same what's happening at the top. Now it's the reason that many people use their F sharp, play their F sharp on 1 and 2. You can slur between the E and the F sharp on 1 and 2, because then you're making the F sharp a friendly harmonic by making it 10. So you slur between 8 on second valve B flat horn and move to 10 on 1 and 2. And the other one between the F and the F sharp, we could play the F, for instance, on the first valve, ninth harmonic, moving to the second valve, which is F sharp, which is also a ninth harmonic. So by evening those two harmonics, we make them much more friendlier and then easier to slur. Like I said before, experiment with your fingerings to find suitable and friendlier slurs, harmonics, for an particularly awkward slur, especially in this area. Also, between like an F and a G, you've got the difference between an eighth and a ninth harmonic. You could use first finger for the F. On the B flat horn, that's a ninth harmonic, to the G open, which is also a ninth harmonic. That helps that as well. Let's move on quickly to the next clam. So, it's the same as a slurpee, but occurring when in the process of slurring, the note under the second note is struck first. Okay. Great, thank you, Bernhard. I call these lazy slurs. And they're releasing that air a little bit too soon, and then you're catching that seventh harmonic. Practice those slurs and concentrating on keeping it really clean, a quicker slur, and also quicker as opposed to slower. So you don't have more time to reach the top, increasing the chance that you're going to hit a note in between. In this instance, just the note before the note you're aiming for, that seventh harmonic. We're going to move quickly on to the prize of all clams, the BAFTA. Yeah, something the great professor never actually mentioned, but in my view, the prize of all clams. Completely wrong note. Usually when going fortissimo for a high note and missing. The examples are too numerous to mention. I've got a lot in my own repertoire. There's many more, and you might have heard several yourself, but we laugh about them, but I mean, they are terribly embarrassing. I've got loads myself that I've done, and that's just a part of life. It's usually when it's fortissimo like this, it's usually because you've allowed a little bit too much space in the embouchure. You've opened the embouchure a bit more to get that power out, and just not got enough their tension to actually produce the note. Like I said, overpowering as well can be the cause, and generally just not absolutely really centered. There's another way. There was a friend of mine who had picked up an instrument to play for the Villanelle actually, and it was a completely different instrument. He could play it fine, but it got to the end and it went completely wrong for the simple fact that his muscle memory was used to his own instrument, and that lick up to the high C was just not the same feeling or the same approach with this completely different instrument. So it's something that muscle memory let him down in this instance, because although it would have worked, a very fine player, by the way. It would have worked on his own instrument. It didn't work on this one because he wasn't actually used to that extra effort required to get that high note. So I hope you don't suffer too many of those, but I'm afraid we've all had several of them. And we're going to move on quickly to the very last
Before we move on, Bernhard is extremely proud of his other performances on BAFTAs and would love to share more. Do you mind if I play some?
Absolutely, we love them. I love the tongue stop. Love the tongue stop, Bernhard.
Thanks. I'm so proud of those. I had to have you all hear them.
That we have to move on quickly. I think, how are we doing for time, Chris?
We got about 3 minutes left until we hit the hour.
Shall we move on briefly then, quickly to questions, or we can throw this last sheet up to. I'll show you briefly what's. Okay, so this is one to help you build up the strength for the upper register. Working on the natural harmonics. Start this one on the low C horn. So C horn 1 and 3 on the F horn. We're moving up in half steps. And they all like that. So moving down to the next one, it's one step harder. And then the next one is a little bit harder. So don't forget, as you work up in these, use the B flat horn from the C sharp, and you're going to end up on the high F on the quasi B flat alto horn. Don't forget also to take that finger off so you don't cheat and use your too much unnecessary pressure on the mouthpiece. So say that's something else to take away with you. Again, it's a long process. Each one of these has 12 different fingerings going down from your low F sharp, the low B natural horn, right the way up to the high B flat alto horn. Now that's something to keep you busy and build on that strength we need for quiet playing in the upper register. Okay.
Wow, thank you so much, Frank. We have time for one quick question that came through the chat from Colleen Wolf. She asked if these exercises that you have presented for us, if you would work them into your daily warm-up, or would you use it as like a separate fundamentals exercise? What's your perspective on that?
I would incorporate them in my everyday workout. You know, like these extended flexibilities. They're great to work on. You can spend a lot of time on them, and they're great conditioning. You don't even have to start playing high with them. There's still a lot of work, even in the lower register. But already they're taking us up to the 12th harmonic. So there's a lot of work involved with those without actually getting particularly high. And that helps us with gaining that stability and that strength without having to get very high. And thus we're building it by degrees, and that will get us higher quicker than just immediately going up into the upper register.
Wow, excellent. Thank you. Well, we should probably wrap it up here. Frank, thank you so much for being our guest today and for presenting the Lexicon of Clamology. I was rolling on the floor laughing at some of these examples that Bernhard so expertly demonstrated for us. I mean, that takes true talent or lack of talent, one of the two.
I'll take either. So.
Well, I hope you've got some. incentive now to go away and practice harder on the technique to help us become a more secure player. And please get in touch, anybody that want to take this, have any queries further, and get in touch with me privately, and I'll help you out. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. It is great to see so many familiar faces in our Horn Camp family. And please join us again. We'll have more Horn Camp Connect events throughout this year leading up to the in-person camp that we are planning. You can find more information on horncamp.org and also reach out to us on our Facebook page.
I believe the next one will likely be in March and maybe one in May. So keep a lookout. See you all then.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Frank, for your presentation. Thanks, Bernhard, and Jesse for the great warm-up. Bernhard, your misses are just as good as all your hits. It's amazing. As Jesse said, you can find us on all the social medias, on Facebook using @KB Instagram using @official_KBHC. And if you'd like to re-watch the session and see and hear Bernhard in all his glory, or if you wanted to share with others, you can find it on our YouTube page, Kendall Betts Horn Camp. It will be up there for 1 week, and then we'll take it down. So take advantage of it while it's there. And thank you guys all so much for joining us today. Like Bernhard said, we're going to be doing a couple more of these, so be on the lookout on our website, horncamp.org. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today, and have a great day and weekend. See y'all later.